Friends, today we're going to discuss the topic of 5 red flags when investing in real estate in Bali. It's a very, very interesting and relevant topic for our times. Let's go. The first is a non-transparent legal structure. If you conduct due diligence and the due diligence reveals a lot of inconsistencies. In general, basically this developer has a very unclear situation or a convoluted legal structure. This is a very serious factor, so pay close attention to it. And unless there are other outweighing factors, for example, if this is your developer whom you've known for a long time, or the developer has been on the market for a long time, or this developer, there is full financing for their project in the accounts. In other words, all the money should be in your accounts. Or, for example, this developer has a project where a hotel operator like Radisson is involved. Just so you understand, if a hotel operator like Radisson comes in to manage, when they check your company, your legal structure, and your finances, you must have all the funds available. For the implementation of the project, the company must have the funds in its account. Pay attention to this, okay? In other words, these are decisive factors. If there are any Hong Kong schemes, Dubai schemes, and so on. So, if the legal structure of the entity or organization you are considering is not a classic, well-established, or commonly recognized one, or if it is unclear, ambiguous, or difficult to understand, and there are no other counterbalancing factors or additional elements that inspire trust or confidence, then that's a significant red flag you should really pay close attention to. And I strongly urge you to always, without exception, conduct thorough legal due diligence through your trusted agent or legal representative to ensure your interests are fully protected. Of course, due diligence is carried out by a lawyer. It is mandatory to go to a notary who makes a notarial request. Only the notary has this right, not the lawyer. Okay, so a non-transparent legal structure or any manipulations, fraud. The second point is signs of a financial pyramid. What is a financial pyramid? A developer starts their first project and sells it at a very low price. He won't have enough money for construction because he sold everything and spent it on administrative expenses, marketing, PR, and so on. He starts selling, packaging, and selling a second project. From the second project, he funnels part of the money into the first one to cover construction costs. At the same time, he inflates the staff. Well, if you have 2 projects, you only need about 1.5 teams for them. Plus, you want to grow, to develop dynamically, to expand rapidly, so you hire even more administrative staff, SMM specialists, marketing agencies, participation in exhibitions, conferences, and so on. And you still don't have enough money. Now, for the second project. For the first project, you were short about 20% of the money, roughly speaking. For the second project, you're already short 50% because even with the sales from the second project, the cost price gets diluted. And you need to launch a third project just to finance half of the second construction. And now, with all the inflated expenses for the third project, you only have enough money to cover 30% of the cost price, and you need to come up with the remaining 70%. This is the classic model of a financial pyramid. I urge you to pay attention to the signs of a financial pyramid. Of course, this isn't a classic MMM scheme, but the signs can be present to a greater or lesser extent. For example, when a developer has 2 projects. I've talked to people, to specialists who have been in construction for 20 years, and not a single one has ever told me that it's possible for you to have a situation like this. 2 legal entities, and you never mix the money between these 2 construction projects. Not a single person has told me that this is possible in practice. Theoretically, anything is possible, but in reality, you still end up moving money from one pocket to another. And when a developer's first project is 70 or 80% sold, that means they have financing, they have a financial partner, and they have a reasonable market price, not super cheap. I urge you to be very wary of anything that's too cheap, the price. So, if the average price is $3,000 per square meter, and someone is selling for $2,000, it's a big question how they're able to do that. Only by saving on taxes. You lose 20%, the developer loses, plus 15%, for the commercial department. So that's 35% right there, purely and exclusively. Just the financial costs for... You basically paid taxes on thin air, paid commissions, salaries, and everything else. There's no 30 or 35% left. If you have a financial partner in the project, you have to give another 20% to the financial partner so they can earn on their invested capital. You understand the logic. right? If the average market price is 3,000 per square meter, he'll come in at 2,000. It's a big question how. If the average price is 3,000, he sells for 2,800 and explains where he saved, not on quality, but where exactly he cut costs. For example, maybe there's no commercial department or it's been eliminated and so on. Then that's normal. If we see that the developer has sold 80% of the first project at a normal market price, has a healthy financial structure, money in the account, all stages of construction match reality, they're on schedule, and they're starting a second project with a financial partner, land already purchased, and so on. That's a healthy situation. But when, like in the first example we mentioned, you go from project to project and you have to launch the third, fifth, or 10th project just to finance the first one, and you still don't have a solid financial structure and you're selling very cheaply and giving huge commissions to agents, that's a red flag. Let's move on. Lack of permits and land issues. If the land is not zoned for that purpose, for example, a green zone called Datar in Bali, where you are not allowed to build. But again, when it comes to the green zone, there are actually different types. There's LSD, where it's completely forbidden, nothing can be built there as it's protected land. Then there are green zones where you can build certain structures, but only for residential purposes and only in small volumes with low density and so on. There are different types, but again, this should be checked with the lawyer and you should get advice from a professional attorney, case by case in each individual situation. If there's a problem with the land, like it's not the right designation, or someone tells you, right now it's a green zone, but we'll change it later. These kinds of cases also happen. I recommend being cautious about this. There's no construction permit, they haven't applied for a PBG, or you hear this kind of story from developers. Sometimes it comes up. We'll have it. 5 floors, but we're applying for a PBG for 4 just to get the PBG. In other words, they submit project documentation for one type of building, but actually build a completely different one. That's a huge red flag. The next red flag is if you're offered a guaranteed return. 15, 20, 25% per year. That's a huge red flag. This really looks like some kind of scam. Why? Because profitability, and especially if they don't sell it to you at market price, if for 3,000 per square meter and they guarantee you profitability, you should always ask how, if they don't have a market justification, they understand it. So I earned the amount invested by the investor and the management company. It will make 12 to 15% per year, or maybe 10 to 12% per year. Records for the first year. Here are the remaining 78. I'll pay the rest out of my own pocket. In other words, he builds a financial model for himself to pay this money. Or he's just a fraudster and doesn't intend to pay anything at all. You know, what's the difference? How much you promise if you don't intend to keep it? That's why overly sweet promises and guarantees are also a factor. A minus. If someone tells you the forecast is 14 to 15% per year, the financial forecast was made by the hotel operator Rebos. That's it. But we have a guarantee of 7% per year for 3 years, and that's a good guarantee. But people often associate it like this. If you say the forecast is 15, then give me 15. But it doesn't work that way because this is a market. Tomorrow, the situation might be different, things might not work out. Maybe the tourist flow will change, maybe there will be a coronavirus or something else. In other words, neither the developer nor the management company can guarantee it, so you, as investors, bear the risks of the market situation. But even 7% during COVID is, in principle, a realistic figure. It provides a minimum guarantee below the most pessimistic forecasts as a guarantee, so that you understand that even in the worst case force majeure, you have financial security, a guaranteed yield. No matter how poorly the hotel operator manages, 7% is a very easy figure to achieve, but it is given as a guarantee. Not from the market forecast. But these are the minimum rates to guarantee you that even in the worst case scenario, your money will be working and not just sitting idle. It's very important to understand this. When you're offered 15, 20, or 30%, you should ask a question. We've had cases where a developer offered a 15% guarantee, and I understand why. Because it's a renovation, their costs are very low, and they have their own management company, which year after year has shown excellent results, and in his case, I understand where this guarantee comes from. But not out of thin air, rather based on clear facts, cases, and the market situation. I would probably highlight this point as number one, but with an asterisk. Personally, I consider these people to be crooks. There's a type of person, maybe not a fraudster, but still a slippery character. You look at him and you just know he's a crook. He'll throw you under the bus at any moment. Wherever it's more profitable, he'll always switch sides. He's so elusive, slippery. That's what they're called. I personally mark this as a red flag, and I recommend you use the same approach. Maybe your criteria will be different, but I never work with people I don't trust. Someone who, in my opinion, seems to be unreliable to me. A person who often changes their terms or conditions along the way, sometimes unexpectedly. We had a real case where we were conducting due diligence on a developer. This due diligence, this review, took us 13 months. At first, they were really cool, pleasant guys who were developing rapidly. Their projects looked great, although they hadn't started construction yet. So everything looked very attractive. In the end, we also didn't work with them. But what was the factor there? I spoke with one of the founders and made agreements about something 5 times. And 5 times he changed his mind, his decision. He was like, no, let's change it. Let's do it differently. I really don't like it when you make an agreement with someone and then they slip away or twist things around. What's more, it's funny. I even had screenshots. I'd tell him, look, my friend, here's what you said. And as for people who are basically crooks, I fundamentally refuse to work with them. And even if I sense or see that someone is like that, their eyes dart around in a bad way, they keep changing their mind, always trying to twist things. Even when it's written in black and white, they try to add shades of gray. I don't work with people like that. And you can spot them. Especially as you get older, with experience, you start to understand who people really are. It becomes clear very quickly, and sometimes it happens that a person can be very recognizable, very popular. But instead of using their popularity to grow and attract capital, they just end up deceiving people, hiding behind their popularity. What does it matter if 100 people bought something when they have millions of followers, millions in their audience, just 100 out of a million? It's nothing to them, right? And that's exactly how they treat those people. But often you can see it in people. And before starting any cooperation with any developer, I would personally meet with them. That is, it was always a personal introduction. I like to go to a bar with someone, travel together, relax on a yacht somewhere, or take part in some, I try to, before going into a partnership with someone, I try to connect with them over some story, interact with them in some way, and see how they reveal themselves. Playing cash flow, for example, people really show their true selves in that game. Playing Mafia, for example, where there's excitement, the drive to win, you can see if a person is willing to step over others to set people up. Cash flow and Mafia are games where basically this kind of behavior is legitimized. So in those games, to some extent, you're competing, more so in Mafia, less in cash flow. But those games really reveal a person's true nature. And I like to choose people in life and go a long way with them. It's the same with developers and the same with projects. If I feel that the person is unreliable, I won't work with them. Even if at the moment the project seems really great and profitable, it's still a risk. I don't take on those risks. Friends, I hope this was helpful. Are you interested in safely investing in Bali real estate? Submit an application and talk to our broker. These are professionals when it comes to our broker internship. How should I put it? Only one person has ever passed. In the entire history of our agency, only one broker who had previously worked as a broker at another agency has passed. All the others did not pass. They didn't pass the exam, didn't pass the screening, didn't complete the training, because the qualifications required to become a broker at True Real Estate are incredibly high. And even when people come to us from other agencies, it's extremely rare for anyone to pass this exam. So contact our company if you want safe, reliable investments and truly professional advice.